All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Lucy Dick Slowe Institute webinar. We're so pleased that you're joining us this afternoon. I'm Melanie Carter, Associate Provost and Director of the Center for HBCU Research, Leadership, and Policy, and we're so glad you decided to join us today. I want to talk a little bit about the Lucy Dick Slowe Institute and why it was established and what our purpose is. So the Lucy Dick Slowe Institute is comprised of programs aligned with the work of Lucy Dick Slowe, who was Dean of Women at Howard University from 1922 to 1937. A recognized higher education trailblazer, Dean Slowe's visionary initiatives and advocacy challenged dominant notions about the centrality of student affairs and student affairs professionals to the overall collegiate experience. So our Lucy Dick Slowe programs are designed to examine issues that impact student development, Black student development at HBCUs and beyond. In addition, we're very much focused on offering professional development programs that draw upon the expertise of student affairs professionals at HBCU and HBCU allied institutions to identify and illuminate effective practices. We also sponsor, conduct, and disseminate research specific to the field of student affairs at HBCUs, and also encourage interdisciplinary collaboration among higher ed professionals and institutions. And so we're really pleased about the Lucy Dick Slowe Institute and always excited to bring you programs that we think are very much aligned with her work and the work of the center. Today's session is especially exciting for us. We have one of our favorite people, Dr. Amy Yeboah Quarkume, Dr. A, as we like to call her. And she has a recently released book on Lucy Dick Slowe titled Her Truth and Service, Lucy Dick Slowe in Her Own Words. And I was sharing with Dr. A that I pre-ordered the book on Kindle, and you should all do the same if you haven't gotten it already. And I was just really overwhelmed with what she's done in terms of actually using primary documents, so you can actually hear the voice of Dean Slowe. And so I appreciate the work that she's done, and look forward to our conversation about Lucy Dick Slowe and more specifically about the newly released publication. So Dr. A, I'm going to turn it over to you, and really look forward to you sharing just briefly or some information about the work or Dean Slowe, and then we'll certainly have questions and we'll have some conversation about the work in her life.
Thank you, Dr. Carter, and thank you for the Center for HBCU Research, Leadership, and Policy and the Lucy Dick Slowe Institute. It's just exciting. I'm happy to be here. It's my first time talking about the book publicly since working on it for like 5 years. So I'm just excited to hear people's feedback, comments, and really talk about what I hope the book does, not just for the field of those who are working in student engagement work, whether it's in administration, whether it's in faculty development or as a teacher, in K-12. I'm excited to kind of do that. So I'm going to have a brief introduction. Then I want to kind of get to some of the questions of the text. So if you can see my screen, give me a thumbs up. Make sure I time myself. There we go. So Lucy Dick Slowe, Her Truth and Service, the title I have for this presentation. Again, it's taken me 5 years to kind of look at her work and try to give her voice back. And I say that because there have been many books, articles, publications about her and things that she's done, from being a leader, from being a sports athlete, from being an administrator, from going to Howard and also going to Columbia for her master's, and also trying to get to her PhD before, unfortunately, she passed. But this is me allowing her to speak for herself and for readers to understand what she was attempting to do with her life and her life work, but also be a reflection for particularly Black women and understanding, how do we exist in higher ed? How do we see ourselves in higher ed? And for those who are training Black women and encouraging Black girls to go to college, what does that mean? How do we prepare Black women for, in Lucy's case, she was talking about preparing women for the modern world, but in 2024, how are we preparing young Black women and girls for November, right? 2024, when we see a lot of legal things that used to exist no longer exist, the economy is shifting. How are we really truly, as HBCUs or as institutions of higher education, really preparing Black women for a future when higher ed wasn't created for women in mind, right? Not even Black women, right? So just a couple of things I want to touch upon with her story. Mr. Slowe, born July 4th, 1883. Unfortunately, you don't ask a Black woman what's her age, or any woman what's her age, right? But Lucy, unfortunately, she lied about her age and a lot of her documentation and going through her work. And she lied about her age not to be vain, but she lost her parents at a very young age. She lost her father before she was 1, her mother before she was 5, and she grieved for about 2 years as a young child dealing with that loss. So a girl born in Virginia. From Virginia, she moves to Baltimore, so she's a Baltimore girl. And from Baltimore, she goes to Howard, right? But she struggles a lot with death. And in reading her work, I felt that death was chasing her. That's why she moved so fast, right? So her last name is Slowe, but she was not slow. She was very fast, very involved. She moved around a lot, but I felt that like death was something that she knew that was very close to her, that she wanted to do so much before she died. But just kind of information there. And if you read the first few pages on page 18, she talks about at Columbia, she wrote a story about a young child who had lost a parent. And her response was, I'll read word for word. "You can't go out and play today, Dora," my aunt replied. "Your mother has just died." "What's my mother dying have to do with me playing? I don't see it. When my pet chicken died, James Williams and I dug a grave, sang over it, and buried it. But we did not stop playing," right? So you can see that grieving was something that wasn't long for her, even though she did grieve for 2 years as a young child, but she just found a way to kind of just pivot and keep on running. Right, but regular Black girl from Virginia, went to school in Baltimore. And this next slide shows a high school picture, right? Slow right there in the corner. She went to Baltimore High School, and she talks about she owed a lot of her success on page 47 to her teachers in Baltimore, right? The Black teachers that kind of gave her education, that trained her to strive for excellence, that allowed her to be confident to apply to Howard and get into Howard. And at Howard, we see her somewhat blossom in not just becoming a leader, becoming a passionate teacher, becoming an athlete, but she was really someone who felt that her teachers and her family, her aunt, who somewhat took care of her after her parents had died, was central to her growth and development. That's Lucy right there in the corner. All right. So sisterhood is a theme in the text I look at. She's a college student at Howard in her teenage years, 18, 19, 20, and her friends, and this was something that she's very much noted for in being the first president of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. But at the core of what these young Black women at Howard were thinking about, how do we create a space for ourselves in a space that's not for us, right? How do we find joy, peace? How do we find a space to socially gather and be collegial, to be of service to our community, right? In a space that doesn't consider us having a voice, that doesn't think of us as someone who can contribute to the American economy, that doesn't see us as valuable voters, right? With sisterhood, her sisters, there's a picture in her archive, and Eastwood Brown, they're talking to each other after they graduate. What they develop with their sisterhood as teenage girls at Howard now becomes something massive. So in the book on page 31 in 1933 at Boulay, which is their annual Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated meeting, 25 years later, she talks about not even imagining what that sisterhood would become, right? Just 25 years later, right? And looking at a sea of women who had now begun to dedicate themselves, their service, their work, their academic careers, as far as their degrees, to being of service to mankind. And that was something that they wanted for themselves in their rooms at Howard, but now it's grown beyond that. And for her, over the years, it changed what that meant for her as far as being a part of that organization. She very much felt that calling to serve, that calling to push Black women to give, was not just a calling just for the organization, but for all women across. So she kind of goes in and out of being affiliated with the organization, or even being president. She talks about that as well. She wants to be a leader for all Black women, not just a certain group of Black women, but she valued the sisterhood that came out of that relationship. So you see some documents between her and her sisters. She goes on to, after she graduates Howard, she goes on to be a teacher in Baltimore, also in DC. So in the book, you read about her work as a K to 12 teacher and her passion for education. I think what I love about this is that she is not just active, impactful, but she's highly intentional, right? She's intentional about the dynamics of race and politics in the US. So I call her like a race woman, but she's intentional as far as raising Black children to be mindful of the fact that politics and policy matter. So that comes out in the text. Then she moves to Howard back again as Dean of Women. And I think that's where the intersection of service and truth kind of hits for me. She comes back to Howard. She decides to kind of lose money, right? And leaving her kid a 12 job to come to Howard for service. She feels like she's doing Howard a service and coming back and leading and creating a safer space for women at Howard. But it cost her the truth. That's the truth, that it cost her not just financially, it cost her mentally, it cost her in her health, it cost her in her sisterhood, her family. But she was doing it for the service of humanity and service of women at Howard. But the truth is that it did cost her. And I think that's one of the things that I grapple with, like how much of a cost should we take as Black women working in higher ed, knowing that it wasn't built for us. It sometimes really kind of thinks about us as being a part of the fabric, even though even at Howard, 70% of the women, the student enrollment is women. When you leave Howard, does your income equal the amount of our counterparts, right? So there's so much that is to grapple with. But she was dedicated to training women for the modern age. Like she was dedicated to, building a space where she felt that at this time students were interested in education, but she felt that even though you want to be a teacher, you should still be also be interested in politics, economics. She pushed for health screenings to be a part of the fabric of Howard, that felt that health was important, that girls who are coming, women and girls who are coming to Howard should have health screenings, they should have their own bank accounts, they should be leadership roles. So she was really pushing for a different sense of what it meant to be a part of Howard. If you're familiar with Howard and the Quad, she really dedicated her life to making sure that infrastructure was on Howard's campus, where women and girls can be on campus and not live off campus and come to class. So we see her digging here, the groundbreaking for the Quad, that we now call the Quad. And then leadership, which is again, being a leader for women across the US with other deans, but not being respected as a leader at times. So here a picture with some of the board members, which is at the bottom of the step, but she probably should be at the top as a dean. In many cases, she was not respected, not given a seat, not honored with her voice. We see it sometimes, her and President Mordecai Johnson. She's talking to him like, my salary was, what's happening. I've been here so long. And then also, I hear you talking things about women at Howard, and I don't feel that's okay. So you read that a lot as far as her work she does. And then lastly, the question of legacy. So legacy, Lucy doesn't have any children. She has family, and you see some letters from her family members there. But she was trying very much to have a legacy at Howard in DC and even Baltimore, across the US, with how we should think about educating Black women and girls in education, right? Because in the US, that is not a conversation that is kind of focused on with institutions that are not built around Black women and girls, right? I was talking to my data science class. I said, there's so much technology, so much satellites, so many tweets, GPS, I can swipe my card and someone can find out where I am. But at the end of the day, we are still missing so many Black women and girls, right? They're still missing and we can't find them, right? That's just mind-boggling that we have so much technology, but we can't find Black women and girls. Talked about family. So there's some letters from her family members thinking about how what she was doing was hurting her, but she still kept tight with her family. So there's a couple of letters from family members, particularly her nephew, who writes to her and says he reads about her work in publications and magazines, and she's proud that she's doing this work, even though he don't see her much. She is proud. And then service. So in the name of service, this is one of the oldest pictures we have of Slowe. And this is like your Howard ID card or your yearbook picture, and you can see the stress in her face, right? In the name of service, right? And service should not be, I think service is glamorous, but it shouldn't be this rough on us in this space. So she takes, as a dean of women, right? This is her picture she takes for the yearbook. showing the amount of pain it takes just to create a space for Black women at Howard. And then the cornerstone, which is the last picture. So she passes away. In the second to last chapter, you read that, she's forced to work while she's somewhat on her deathbed, right? And she passed away, not being able to take care of herself, go to the doctor, the institutional situation of healthcare and John Hopkins and being from Baltimore, paying Baltimore taxes, but not being able to access the best care becomes challenging. And then working at Howard is challenging as well. But, when we think about what Lucy did for Howard, for higher ed, for Black women, the legacy that she tried to leave, are we living that, right? Years later, are we still replicating some of the things and institutions she created, or are we digressing and not allowing Black women to lead the economic conversations, the political conversations, and being seen and heard? So I'll stop there, and I'm interested in kind of questions and comments about the text. Again, my goal in this text was to allow her to speak for herself. In the books that exist, I think they all look at her life with each author's voice. But I think really hearing her voice and reading her letters, seeing her pictures, seeing how she corresponds with her colleagues, lets you know that she was really trying to serve, create an organization, led organizations that dealt with service. But the truth is that it cost her. And how do we find balance in doing good work in a space that's supposed to be creating so much for us as a humanity in education, research, innovation, solutions? But the truth is that we don't lose ourselves in those conversations and that work we do. So thank you. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Carter. Oh, sorry.
Right. Thanks so much, Dr. A. It was very, very powerful. And in fact, those pictures, particularly the last picture, is so telling. There's so much there. And then the letter from her nephew actually warms my heart. I have two nephews who I love, but certainly thinking about a letter they would write if they ever would. Okay, it would certainly be a great thing.
Yeah.
But this really, when we think about some of the remarks that you made, you talked about Lucy Dick Slowe, and particularly during this time. And when I think about the title of our webinar, which is Stepping into Tomorrow, Preparing Black Women at HBCUs for a Modern World. I mean, there's so many things that come to mind as we think about Lucy Dick Slowe's story, and particularly as her words sort of resound in our ears. I think we really must address. One of the things that I'm wondering, when we think about the modern world and think about her time, particularly we think about her time at Howard from 1922 to 1937, and how much was going on in the world. I mean, women had just gotten the right to vote. There's all kinds of, certainly there's a club women's movement. Women are really taking the lead in some significant ways, or trying to make sure that they're heard in critical spaces, and also how she engaged with contemporaries of hers, like Mary McLeod Bethune and others, who continue to influence our thinking about women and leadership and at HBCUs and certainly beyond that. And because one of the things that you so aptly point out is that she really was a very, very cosmopolitan in many ways, but also involved in so many fronts. So I know at the beginning of the book, you talk about how you became interested in sort of considering Lucy Dick Slowe. Can you talk a little bit about how you first found out about her and what attracted you to a study about Lucy Dick Slowe?
So I think to be transparent, I teach a course, Black in America, and I try to kind of create innovative ways for students to do some archival work and kind of get their history in person. And Moreland Spingard had they have a finding aid of Black women collections, right? So I was like, okay, let me choose one. And I saw Lucy's name. I said, oh, I know Lucy. I've heard that name before.
Okay.
The Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Circle and Howard Dean of Women. So honestly, to be transparent, I thought that was going to be an easy, like, pull a box. I'll see gold medals in there,
Sure.
trophies. So I was okay. Yeah, like everyone go to Lucy's collection and let's talk about how glamorous her life was.
Sure.
And I was just shocked that number one, it was not just like a couple of boxes, but it was many boxes.
Mm-hmm.
And her pictures, she was not smiling. I didn't see, I saw some medals, pins, and these are from women who she's working with. But the idea that, she was honored, she was celebrated, even her sports life, like,
Mm-hmm.
there's a part where, she isn't given so much accolades in the sports world because it's racist, right? So she's not in the USTA. But I was just shocked to know that the image of her being celebrated was not the image I saw in her box,
Mm-hmm.
right? And she passed away and she's in her grave, but her box remains. And for those of us who are kind of going through her box, it was disheartening to read
Mm-hmm.
how much pain sometimes she felt getting on a
Mm-hmm.
train, going to a conference, not getting reimbursed, doing grading, not having a TA,
Mm-hmm.
wanting to have so much for her students, but not getting the approval. It just hurt. So that's how it started. And I felt that I thought that I was going to see just a shiny box of all this nice stuff about her. But what I really read was like in 2024, she was an influencer, but her DMs were very sad. Like she was
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
someone who loved what she did, but didn't feel supported in some cases, and really just hustled until
Mm-hmm.
she passed away.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. And so, um, I didn't mention because we know Dr. A so well. She is an associate professor in African and African American Studies here at Howard University, in addition to holding a host of other hats here at Howard. And so, as I think about that very thing, and I know we've talked about this before, what do you think that means? It's interesting when we think about Lucy Dick Slowe because we say she gave so much, right?
Mhm.
Continuously gave so much, and she had certainly some challenges with. Um, People recognizing what she was doing and giving her the resources and the supports and other kind of things that she needed. When we think about the modern world in the mid 1920s and a little beyond, how do you think that compares to how women navigate academia, specifically HBCUs today?
Mhm.
What
I mean,
lessons
yeah. So I mean,
are
I
there
think the
for
numbers are
us?
different as far as enrollment. So we
Mm-hmm.
see a large number, particularly in HBCUs, of Black women entering the space, getting degrees. There's still a couple of first in some
Mm-hmm.
majors, right? And Lucy was trying to allow Black women to decide what major they wanted. So teaching is
Mm-hmm.
an area, but you can do political science, engineering. So we see some of that diversity. But when we look at what many Black women are leaving HBCUs with, as far as opportunities, as far as careers, even looking at healthcare, right?
Mm-hmm.
Someone had sent me a link to a conversation about doctoral students and egg freezing, right? Like some of the same issues still exist in a different manner, and we've kind of moved the needle, but not much, right? That the sacrifices we make to learn and be innovative in research, we still have challenges with family, right? You may get the highest degree, which is a PhD, and people are still graduating and their income is at 50, 60, right? So it's a
Mm-hmm.
sense of some of the same issues that exist at HBCUs. Are we really thinking about the wealth gap that Black women deal with outside of higher ed, that we are strategically making sure that our students are positioned to be able to close that gap, right?
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that they've invested in our institution and studying, that we are just that intentional, right? Lucy talks about being intentional that, oh, I know
Mm-hmm.
Mary Bethune. When you graduate, I'm gonna make sure that you talk to her, get a job,
Mm-hmm.
negotiate your salary.
Sure.
So just that sense of intentionality, I think, because higher ed has become somewhat of a market of business,
Mhm.
right?
Cottage industry.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, okay.
Yes, let's be honest.
Uh-huh.
It's harder to say we can be intentional for Black women
Mm-hmm.
when they're the biggest consumers, right,
Mm-hmm.
of HBCUs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't do that, we just do such a disservice to her work, because she, as Dean of Women, that was her vision. Like they
Sure.
were gonna come in here, they're gonna go better than they came in, and America would feel that because they came in, that they made that much of a difference, right?
Sure.
Different outside of a PWI, right? At a HBCU
Mm-hmm.
would be that much more impactful, empowered, healthy,
Mm-hmm.
live a more fulfilled life, and not have to kind of choose how what to balance to be
Mm-hmm.
happy.
Sure. You um earlier you used a phrase that was actually used just yesterday evening in a class that I was teaching, um, and you said that these institutions weren't built for us. And someone yesterday said, you determine whether or not this particular role, are you built for the role? And I
Mhm.
wonder, so playing around with that phrase, because I thought then, yeah, are we built for the role or is the role built for us? And what does that mean? Should we um, change not only who we are in order to fit someone else's expectation, or should we be working at changing the institution that wasn't built for us and make it uh, more aligned with, what's good for us, what's healthy for us? I mean, so I'm just wondering what you think about. You used that phrase earlier,
Yeah.
made me think about what I
Yeah.
heard yesterday evening.
No, very interesting. I think higher ed was not built for us.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think, let's say education. So when we
Hmm.
talk about African studic education,
Hmm.
women are your primary teachers, right? So
Hmm.
the fact that we are educators as
Hmm.
Black women, we can educate, right? That's innate to us. But schooling, as an
Hmm.
American schooling education, that's totally different. So
Hmm.
are we built to be able to exist in this system of schooling? Not quite. I think what's inherent to us is educating. And I think I agree with the person who, like, we have to
Hmm.
think about how do we best prepare to engage in the system
Hmm.
and build up ourselves to protect ourselves
Sure. Sure.
for possibly doing good work, right?
Hmm.
The work that Lucy did was incredible
Hmm.
at Howard, right? And we're
Absolutely.
grateful for that work. And someone had to do it. We're thankful that she did do it.
Hmm.
But it definitely takes a type of character, a type of understanding as far as the end goals, like how
Hmm.
far do you go, the limits,
Hmm.
and there's in her books, in her archives, the letters where people were saying, leave Howard, come here. When do you listen to
Hmm.
yourself and others say, you know what, I can do my work somewhere else and still make an impact versus I have to do it here, Howard, I have to do it here at this institution because sometimes having knowing limits it's healthy and
Yes.
knowing that coming into the space it wasn't built for you also gives you a different perspective, engaging your goals and the goals that you think needs to be kind of played out in this space. And
Hmm.
Lucy was someone who understood purpose. She
Sure.
understood purpose. She understood building. She understood collaboration. She understood power. But I think sometimes at some point she felt that she could withstand the power of the space, and her physical body just couldn't, along with racism, sexism,
Sure.
classism.
Hmm.
Right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Wow. And that also leads me to think about, I mentioned earlier, club women. I mean, oftentimes, we think about women's clubs and we know they were extremely important. They are extremely important, certainly during this period. We see the founding of so many organizations. Certainly she's a founder of our sorority, aka Alpha Kappa Alpha, and as well as, very involved with a host of other civic, social,
Mm-hmm.
professional associations. And I wonder when we think about women, in particular, Black women, how important these various organizations and associations were to sort of building their capacity to lead and an expectation to lead in
Mm-hmm.
ways that some of these systems, some of these structures or places that weren't built for them
Mm-hmm.
weren't ready to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I think so. In the text, there's a social conversation between leading and social. Like, so,
mhm,
okay, this org is just social, but this org is
mhm,
a more leader. And I think that's kind of laid out as far as leading
mhm,
and being social. We're two things that were equally important. The fact that you're sanity, right?
mhm.
So
There you
we
go.
see coming together at a space that is predominantly men, and you're a
Mhm,
woman. You're learning, whether it's chemistry, political science, reading, like how do we socially keep ourselves grounded
mhm,
is
mhm.
as important as we build power to
That's
lead a
right.
space, right? So this idea of coming together collectively and being a part of a club, being
Mhm.
part of an association, knowing that I'm not by myself
There you go.
was so critical, so
Mhm,
critical.
mhm,
And I feel like if they didn't have these social circles, clubs, spaces where Black women come together and talk to each other,
mhm,
the numbers probably be even worse, right?
mhm,
But
mhm,
having a sense of a group to work with, to lean on, to vet your emotions out on and with, and still stay focused on I'm committed for the service, allowed us to go so far, right? But I think in the intro I say, you know, you can do everything for everyone and sometimes still not feel valued is a
Oh,
challenge,
yes.
right? So she
Mhm.
was in mostly, let's say, every popular org,
Mhm.
NWP, AKA, NAUW, she's
Mhm.
Cartoon. But
Mhm.
if she walks in a space and no one recognizes her, she's not valued.
Sure.
If she shows up somewhere and Du Bois is in the same room and everyone's like, Du Bois, Du Bois, Du Bois, and no, she's not valued. So
Mhm.
that's the challenge. Like you can do everything, but still not be valued, still not be seen. It's hard, and it's even hard today. Like that we can do so much, sign so many letters, teach so many students, walk in a room or be in a grocery store and someone be like, "Is that you?" And not know it's you,
Mhm.
but know that you put so much in
Sure.
allowing people to advance so far, right? Because when Black women advance, everyone else advances. Um, but not be valued is the thing that it hurts. It hurts. And to see her
Yes.
like know that her colleagues sometimes who are men didn't value her opinion or
Mhm.
didn't recognize her or even give her acknowledgement was very, very tough to read.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think about when I teach history of higher education, um, we talk about sort of the workhorses or the muse of higher education sometimes. We think about HBCUs that way because, we're doing all this and don't necessarily get the credit. And also, I always say that HBCUs have really impacted every nook and cranny of the nation. If we think about
Mhm.
who taught us, who served as physicians or dentists or our ministers and a host of other all kinds of parents didn't attend, your grandparents or your aunts, uncles, cousins. So there are very few spaces in this nation that haven't been influenced and shaped by HBCUs. And when I think about Lucy Dick Slowe and women like her, particularly Dean Slowe, I think last week I was at I gave a address at the National Association of Student Affairs Professionals,
Mhm.
which had its 70th, I
Wow.
can't talk, anniversary. And again, they credit Dean Slowe with being one of the founders because one of the predecessor organizations that she founded, sort of is what was the early version of this organization. So again, we think about her there as a founder of the sorority and all the other things. We see her imprint all over the place. And that's still true, I think, with Black women. In this case, we're talking about HBCUs, for example. And I wonder if there's a way, one of the things the center wants to do is illuminate these stories and craft a narrative that conveys their work. And I wonder, certainly your book does that and others, but I wonder how we can do it in a way that doesn't uh, have us waiting, you know, 50 years after they've died
Mhm.
to do that so that they feel some value,
Mhm.
right? We feel some value
Mhm.
um, that we're valued by our institutions,
Mhm.
even while we're you know,
Mhm.
walking on this earth
Yeah.
and serving in these capacities.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Thank you. It's interesting. The whole monuments conversation is kind of happening now,
Mhm.
right? And I think that's America's version. Like, how do you remember? You put a monument
There
down.
you
You can
go.
walk
There
on
you go.
campus and you can see maybe some figures that look like women, right, in the
Mhm.
valley. But do we really see women in monuments on campuses? And I think that's the first way that we can
Wow.
remember, like literally seeing her
That's
face spaces, like seeing her picture
mhm.
in spaces. Like, do we really
Mhm.
dedicate space? If the issue is visibility, do we make space for us to see women and Black women in these spaces or buildings or names buildings?
Mhm.
That I think it's a conversation that I think America understands that we could begin to pull down, let's say, white men and erect statues of Black women. Like
That's right.
I think yeah, I haven't seen a bust or a statue
Yeah.
of Big Slow anywhere. And the building conversation becomes hard because like people forget, and then architecture is a thing that it can come down.
Sure.
So there was a school that was named after her, but it was changed. The dorm that used to be
Mhm.
near campus,
Mhm.
Slowe, I think that was changed, and now
So
it's called
yeah, it
something
was
else.
exactly.
So the
Mhm.
architecture is part, but statues, you will see her face, you will see her full body, and when you walk by, you'll at least remember that she was in the space, and kind of become this like external cemetery that we think about. Oh, okay, she walked these grounds. I see her. So I think that's one way to do it. Um,
That's a powerful way.
yeah.
Absolutely.
I saw a post. I think Dr. Josh Myers had this post of like it was like a stack of like books on Lincoln. It was like
Mm,
200 books on Lincoln. But no one argues about that, right? So let's have 200 books on Lucy Dick Slowe. Like let's all
there
keep
you
writing
go.
books. The more we keep writing books, I think my version is our current version of like a tweet, a post, a DM of what I feel like we should know about her life.
Mm,
But someone could write something else about her.
sure.
And we can continue to write about her, and that keeps her. But we shouldn't assume that just 3 or 4 is enough,
That's
because
right.
some people have two. Du Bois has I don't know how many books about him.
Oh, exactly.
So we should continue to write books. I'm hoping my students, so the proceeds from the book will go to the Moreland. So for students to be able to come
Mm,
in to open up more Black women's archives in Moreland, hopefully we'll get more books, not just one, but 10, 5 on each of them,
sure.
to allow us to continue the conversations. Just how films have versions, right? We should have versions of books of Black women's lives and remember ourselves what these women and their dedication to their work, like how does that like, what does that mean to us? And our children can write their own version and so on and so
Hmm. Oh, I love that. That is so true. And I love the monuments. And certainly, again, we think of as you're saying, with Lincoln or with Du Bois or whomever, there are tens of thousands of books, and there can be tens of thousands more, and no one ever questions that there are so many lessons and perspectives and reasons to probe, to learn more about ourselves and the individual. But that's so true that we don't do that enough for women, and certainly not for Black women. So I love that. I'm wondering, as you think about, I mean, certainly, reading about Lucy Dick Slowe is powerful. You named several publications that focus on Lucy Dick Slowe, although that's very recent in terms of thinking about her as an object of a focus of study. But I'm wondering, given your work in the archives, when you're actually touching primary documents, right? Her writing, some of her things as you described them. What lessons did you learn that you don't think one could learn from just reading the other publications that really uh, are not focused on illuminating the primary documents?
Yeah, so I think so one, putting her whole life in the book is a lot of work, right? And the automatic assumption is what's being left out,
Mm,
right? So with this book, I don't have all her letters in there.
mm,
Not every conversation she had was a letter. Some was
mhm,
just a verbal conversation, but I
mhm,
think I was able to present her thoughts and her fears and her concerns, I guess, much as I
mhm.
could. But someone may say she struggled at Howard. That would be one line. But
Wow.
to see and go back and forth between her and the board of her trustees and her negotiating her salary is just like the determination,
Yes.
right? Put it on letterhead. I started working here in 1922. Since that time, I've made this amount of money.
Mhm,
My pay has not gone up despite the depression and despite the fact that every other male in my department has been given a raise. And she would go back and month after month, dear trustee. And for me, the question of the wage gap, how dedicated have I been to advocating for myself and my pay?
mhm,
If Slowe can write a letter, I can send
mhm.
some emails. How many of my
Sure.
students and colleagues are,
Mhm,
looking for a promotion? Have we all checked in with
mhm.
our salaries and asked for a promotion because the cost of bread's going up, right?
That's
Have
right.
we all? So I think that's what you get, that she's writing to her friends, her family, her colleagues, her sorority sisters. She's giving speeches, and she's talking to actually everyone, right? But there are moments
Mhm,
where she's talking to men, and
mhm,
she's very blunt. Like, listen, I'm here. I don't care if you like it or you don't like it, but the world we live in, I'm not leaving, right? Black women are
mhm,
going to be here. So outside of Howard, just get
mhm,
used to Black women speaking, demanding things. So I want you men to kind of get used to this. Like, don't feel as if this is like a certain space. Like, more of us are coming, and you
mhm,
need to get used to seeing us here, hearing our voice, honoring us when we walk in the yard. So when I walk up, you need to look at me, say hi. So
mhm,
she's doing that, and she's just so meticulous.
mhm,
So knowing that I can go back and read that, and like it's a template, right?
Sure.
It gives me confidence in saying, if she can do this, I can do it too, you
Right,
know.
exactly.
And I have, she never got an answer for her promotion. She wasn't always spoken to. At some time, she was called a matron. She was called out
Mhm,
of her name,
mhm,
disrespected. So I can't expect not to have that happen to me in that same
mhm,
breath.
mhm.
But she still came to work, wore her fur, walked
Sure,
on the yard,
she sure
all her
did.
classes, graded her
Mhm,
papers, took some of, so she still did that alongside defending herself, defending her work. Like she was invested in knowing that students come to college to get a degree, but that's only less than 50% of the time that they spend. So they're in the classroom for like 30% of the time. Outside the classroom is more important. So what are you doing in your free time while you're in college? What are you playing?
mhm,
What orgs are you in?
mhm,
How you spending your money? So the student affairs part was very passionate for her.
mhm,
She felt that that part was the most important part of a student's life, the
mhm,
outside of classroom life you lived, the social part that you decided to dedicate yourself to. And she wanted that to be um, equally robust for Black women as it was for men in many spaces. Um,
mhm. That's so important. And I think about um, we now talk about a sense of belonging, right? What it means to have a campus culture that supports students and so forth. And one of the things I'm known for saying is there is no secret sauce. In fact, that was the title of my remarks the other day at NASAP, because oftentimes what we do on our campuses, we're viewed as magical, what I call magical Negroes, right? This is all magic. We do love people, and love is particular. I mean, there's a particular um, framework around that I think is embedded in who we are, but also is based upon what we've been able to do successfully for 100 years. I mean, this is not new to us, and she provides Dean Slowe in terms of her initiatives and what she wanted for students in terms of understanding student development, understanding that, as you said, 30% of their experiences are in the classroom, 70% are out of the classroom. So really, this is a profession. This is some work where it's just not, it's art and science.
mhm,
We've learned this over time, and we're putting in place these things. And so when I think about how she really helped to send that message. And she was conferring with people not only at HBCUs but everywhere, right, around the
mhm.
profession and building that profession at HBCUs and others. So I think she is the counter or the narrative to this notion about secret sauce. No, she gave her life, right,
Mhm,
to cultivate, frame, and implement,
mhm,
right, her theory about student development and what that means for Black colleges. So as you talk about her walking on campus, engaging with students, and Jelani Favors in his book Shelter in the Time of Storm, a historian who is at North Carolina A&T, talks about HBCUs having a second curriculum, right,
mm,
where they're fostering student
yeah,
leadership and activism. And so I think about her work in student affairs as maybe a part of that second curriculum, that what happens, I mean, there really is no clear distinction between academic and student affairs, but what happens in that experience, we have to be intentional, as you say, about it. Um,
definitely. And she was very strategic. She was like, okay, in the morning, go to chapel. So,
yeah,
it's a spiritual thing to be in a space where you're not welcome. Mentally needs to check in. I don't care how you do it, but we spend time spiritually checking in with yourself. Do a sport, be active, take care
there
of
you
your
go.
health.
That's right.
Be social, like don't be a
Mhm,
loner, be social, and then
sure.
be a leader, right? Do research, be serious about your degree selection. Um, Economics and finance, have a bank account. She was pushing for that, like have a bank account, know your finances. And something else you brought up, the sheer notion of knowing that, this time you have in higher ed has limits. Like you won't be here forever. At a time you will leave this space and you enter this new world that no one thought that we would wake up and affirmative action will be gone. AI will be taking over people's jobs. Like these things are just changing so much that by the time you leave, we should be preparing you for the new world that you're entering, that wasn't there when you came into college, but is now there when you're about to leave. That
Sure.
for Black women, many times we do have to, yes, go learn calculus, learn English, but at the end, can you balance your bank account?
There you go.
I mean, your
Mhm,
credit score. Have you checked in with the health center? Are you healthy? Right? Have you done a
Yeah.
mental health check?
That's right. That's
Right?
right.
Is your living space livable? Right? So having a dorm was very important for her because she felt that women were living off campus and weren't given on campus space. So having that, having an elevator, right? You know, just things like that, that it gives you ease to learn, but also it teaches you, you have the space to live hopefully a healthier life, and not go back to a space that wasn't, that 4 years ago, that no longer exists. In
Sure.
4 years, things change.
That's right. That's right. And we have a couple questions from the chat I want to pose. The first one is, what are some examples of protection Black women at HBCUs can leverage as lessons learned from Dean Slowe's experiences?
So protection. So she was, and this may be controversial, so she went to Columbia for her master's degree, and she made friends with her colleagues there. So that was her protection. Like she had friends outside of her workspace. So if something went down, she had, okay, Howard's offering me this much money. How much you making over there? Can you let me know? And if write a letter for me, telling them that they are not paying me enough. So she definitely had people across different spaces to understand, number one, how she shouldn't accept what is given beneath her because it will bring back those after her back. So having colleagues across institutions, she had colleagues across HBCUs, colleagues across deans, PWIs. She had colleagues in political spaces. So when it comes to the value part, just knowing how other institutions are framing or shaping certain things, that if you're the first person to be in a space at a job at an institution, you probably should see how that's being formed at another space and how they're structuring that to be able to protect yourself, if you're given less than what you think you deserve. When it comes to research and putting your team together, knowing that she was very meticulous as far as note taking, right? So there's a moment where a colleague, in short, assaulted her. She wanted to advocate for some women students on campus. He called out her name. He insulted her. It was a whole big thing, and she wrote that thing down.
Oh,
She
she did.
documented it, saved it, sent it to the president, like, I do not accept this type of behavior. It wasn't addressed or cleaned up, I think, how she liked, but she has evidence, right? So
Sure.
the Me Too, Lucy was a part of that in her day.
She sure
So,
was.
but she documented everything to protect herself and to train other Black women about how to negotiate this space that it didn't change overnight, that the guy apologized or she got flowers. No, like if you're in a space that is not healthy, you document, you tell the people, you fight for yourself. So I think those are the things that she, for me, highlighted, that it's still not too late to send an email that someone said something to you, just to protect yourself.
Sure.
And it isn't, we always need colleagues. We always need colleagues across institutions just to cross check and protect ourselves.
Absolutely. And also, I think that is so important in that story, even though it's very painful to read, though she documents what he said to her and so forth. But it's important because, again, we wouldn't have, sometimes we think about this era and think, oh, people were gentlemanly or everyone was courteous or whatever. And we don't understand the level of hostility that she had to deal with. And that is extremely important in terms of documenting that. So we could, even now in 2024, know that, what someone said to her in the 1920s was just, or completely outrageous. But what would give people the notion that they could say that? Also, that she had those, I love what you said about her connections outside of Howard, but also her, the respect shown her be in the city, but beyond Howard. I think is important too in terms of, thinking about that. So that's great. I appreciate that, Dr. A. Another question from the chat, and this question around her being a founder of a sorority often comes up because oftentimes I I think, and this is, certainly I appreciate her being the founder. I'm a member of the sorority, have been for 40 years on. But sometimes I sometimes think that sometimes our conversation may reduce her to, and that's not to say that the reduction is a great thing. We're a great organization. I know in one of her letters, she talked about how she couldn't be the president. She couldn't take on some role in the sorority because she wanted to treat everyone the same, right? She didn't want to be viewed as, the representative of Alpha Kappa Alpha on campus. But this question says, so I wonder about what you would think of how the Greek letter organizations are, how they operate or how they um, their current day role in terms of campus. So this person says is very specific about as what Dean Slowe's thoughts about Greek limitations line caps at how it would be. Greek limitations. You talk about line caps, caps on the number of people
Okay.
can be brought
The
in.
number,
See, some of
yeah.
this language I don't even know anymore. Okay, but I guess in terms of
Yeah.
restricting the number of people who can join these
Yeah.
organizations as undergraduates,
No,
I guess.
interesting. Congratulations to the recent Alpha Chapter line that I think was came out on Saturday.
Oh,
Congratulations
okay. See, I didn't even
to the
know.
woman.
Okay.
Yeah, so when you read her speech she gave when the org turned 25, she talks about, then this was something that her and her friends,
Mm-hmm.
right, that came up with.
Mm-hmm.
And she became the first president at the time, and she just didn't think that it would be what it is 25 years, right? So to look at
Mm-hmm.
it now, and again, between 25 and now, before she passed, she talks about not wanting to be the president because she felt that her work and her purpose was to all women. When she
Mm-hmm.
kind of fit in that position, it would cut her off from certain women
Mm-hmm.
because the nature in which the org had changed, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it was a sense of um, who's in and who's not in. And she felt
Mm-hmm.
like that was shifting the call, that she felt that it was about higher women in higher education coming up to a level. So higher ed, height at the mountaintop, seeing above this whole landscape of the world. What do we give of that privilege to others, right? And that it has shifted from what do we give to others, but it was about who can get into doing that work. That was a little bit, it was hard for her to kind of manage. But so the cap, I'm not sure what she said about the cap specifically, but I know she would say that there's so many problems in the world. We need more hands than we have problems.
That's
How can
right.
we figure out a way to get other people involved if they were not affiliated, that wouldn't cause so much tension? The
Mm-hmm.
fact that we have colors, letters, paraphernalia, like, like that, it's there. She loves it, but it's a lot. And if you're
Mm-hmm.
not in it, we still need helping hands. So we should
Mm-hmm.
be focused on how do we get more helping hands in with the problems that we're facing to move the needle alongside giving pride, sisterhood, joy, this, it's hard. So it was hard for the balance, but I would say she would want more people in the org because we have so many problems that need these gifted hands that have been educated in higher ed. So I'll say that.
I love that. I love that. I think that's so true. All right. So I know we're approaching the top of the hour, so I want to give you an opportunity, Dr. A, for any closing remarks about her truth and her service, or about Lucy Dick-Slowe in general.
Yeah. So in closing, I want to say this one thing because I know people in the habit of like getting books and getting it signed.
Hmm.
I think I won't do that because I think these are her words. So putting my
Hmm.
signature on her words, I'm a little bit indifferent, but maybe I will. I don't know. But
Okay.
I would hope that if you do get this book, whether it's an ebook or a hard copy book, that you would really think about. I think all of us have this service in us, right? What is your service, and what's the truth about that? Like truthfully speaking, what are your limits? What are your what is your sense of connecting your service to your family and not losing
Mm,
sight of that? um what is what is the line that cannot be crossed, right? And then what is your value, right? And that, again, bread goes up every year.
every
Like, do
year.
you reevaluate the value, not only that you are saying that people should give you, but that that people are giving you? And if that
Mm,
needs to be assessed, I think it's okay to say, okay, I can't do the same thing and expect a different result, right? Particularly when it comes to your health,
that's
right? If
right.
your health is something that's being
Hmm.
that you're paying a price for
Hmm.
in the service, the truth is you need to reevaluate it. And because we
Absolutely.
cannot afford to cut our life expectancy short.
That's
Like, we cannot afford going to Howard, going to an HBCU, getting a college degree is priceless. And the work that you can do based upon that knowledge that you've been given, we have to live long to be able to kind of make the impacts we hope to make, whether it's in mathematics, political science, religion, whatever field we need to live long in this work. And for Black women, I would say, um, I don't know, in Lucy did a lot, but we need to be mindful that the space wasn't created for us. We need to think about what does it mean to be in the large numbers in a space that doesn't give us value, whether it's in leadership, whether it's in finances, whether it's in you're graduating a major and you cannot find a job. Like, how do we reassess that before you begin to leave, like we do any other thing as far as um, other investments, like Howard is an investment, higher ed is an investment. Make sure let's try to get the best investment out of the best returns out of our investments as we enter this space. And how can we be intentional in doing that? So yeah, I'll stop there. Thank you.
I love that. And that is so true. The ROI for Black women at HBCUs, we need to be concerned about what that looks like. And that could be our ROI, not necessarily someone else's. There's a return on investment to others, but is that return, are we also benefiting from that return? But thank you so much, Dr. A, as always. This was a great conversation. I've been looking forward to this publication, and certainly doesn't disappoint. In fact, it exceeds my expectation. So I look forward to delving even more deeply into the book. I have my Kindle edition because I'm addicted to Kindle, but I'm also going to have a hard copy, and I know you don't want to sign it, but I'm going to need you to sign it. Okay, okay.
You say it like
so
that.
Again, okay, all right. So I want to thank everyone again for joining us today for Lucy Dick Slowe Institute webinar, and today's topic, stepping into tomorrow, preparing Black women at HBCUs for a modern world. And we want to thank Dr. Amy Yeboah Quarkume for discussing her latest work, which is Her Truth and Service, the life of Lucy Dick Slowe. I'm sure I missed that title, but you get the picture. It is available on Amazon and at your favorite local bookstore. So again, thanks so much, Dr. A. Thanks to everyone for joining us. And please sign up for our newsletter, visit our website, and plan to attend future HBCU Center events. Have a great day, everyone.